Welcome everyone to Coffee with the Codex. My name is Dot Porter. I am a curator in the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies, which is in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books, and Manuscripts in the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. Once a week, I take a book off of our shelves and do this informal 30-minute show and tell. This is not a lecture. This is a looking at a cool thing together. We are joined by my colleague, Amy Hutchins, up there. Amy is our manuscripts cataloging librarian, and she will be watching the chat to answer questions. I'm also going to keep my eye on the chat. So if you have anything to say or questions or anything, go ahead and put them in, and we'll address them as we can. So without further ado, we are going to start looking through this one. So this book is pretty neat for a variety of reasons. So Coffee with the Codex, it is manuscript oriented. This is actually, I'm cheating a little tiny bit because this is a printed book. It does have some manuscript pages as part of it, which is technically why it's in our manuscript collection. And it has a manuscript number, right? It's MS Codex 1531. But it's interesting because it's an early printed book that is a genre of manuscript. The text is actually from a very popular genre of manuscript, and also it has some manuscript elements beyond those pages at the end. So I want to start by looking at the binding, because the binding is something that we don't see a lot, which is that it is an original binding. So this is a 16th century binding that we believe was the original binding for this manuscript. So when the book was made, it was put in this binding, and it has never been out of this binding, which means that the binding is very old, and it's kind of coming apart. So I have it, instead of on my usual pretty pillow, I have it on these foam things to give it a little bit more support, and you'll see as I'm moving through it, I'm going to be really careful with it. So the binding is velvet. It's sort of a dark, I think this is technically a dark blue velvet, although it's quite faded now. It is over wooden boards. So I'll turn it here a little bit so we can see, so we can see here the wood. And I believe that there is also, yes, there's leather. I'm going to be very careful here. There's actually leather over the board too. So there's leather on the wood, and then there's this, oh, that looks much more blue now. In the camera, it actually looks less blue underneath. And the velvet, as you can see, it's quite worn. So along the spine, there are these ridges here. This is sewing, this is part of the sewing structure. So you can see that the thread, where the sections, the quires, which are the pieces of the manuscript, we'll see a lot more of those as we go here, but you can kind of see where this is folded together, is pushed through there's a little, again, there's leather here, and the velvet has just absolutely worn away because of this has been pushing through here. And then we have some furniture, these like metal parts here, which would originally have had some kind of clasp that would have held the book together, maybe leather. They are long since gone, though. Okay. So we'll take a look on the inside, because there's interesting things to see here. So I'm going to try to, there we go. You can see here, these are metal, sharp metal pieces that are holding, that's what's holding these together. So you can see these were nailed. They're literally nails, right? Little nails that are sort of holding them in. So they hammered the nails through the wood, and then they would have been poking up out, and then they pushed them down. They probably hammered them down a little bit. So I'm not going to cut myself on that. We do have some owner's book plates here. Let me see if I can find that. We have Mary S. Collins, who was from Philadelphia. So this is a more recent one, dated 1938. So Mary S. Collins, who lived in Philadelphia around 1938, owned it. She was the wife of Curtis Publishing executive and manuscript collector Philip S. Collins. So she had her own. It was in H.P. Krause. So this is a bookseller, so it passed through their hands. And then I actually went backwards a little bit, or out of order. It was formerly owned by the Marquesas of Lothian. And so that is this book plate here. And it was sold by a sale in 1932 to Philadelphia bookseller Charles Sessler. So it's been in the U.S. since 1932. Before that, it was in Lothian. And there we go. Okay, so what you're all wondering, like, okay, so great, what is this? So this is a book of hours. We've looked at books of hours before. We looked at one, I think, pretty recently, because they're a very popular genre. So a book of hours is a prayer book, a specific kind of prayer book that was, it's called the Book of Hours because it contains a set of prayers called the Hours of the Virgin, which is based on the canonical hours, which were the daily prayers said by monks and nuns. So people who lived in a monastic houses you'd wake up in the morning and you'd go and do some prayers, and then you'd do some work, and then you'd say some more prayers a couple hours later. And so it's based on that. And it was sort of a way to bring that practice, that daily practice, into the homes of individuals. And books of hours were very popular from this, I think, the late 13th into the 14th centuries, and then into the 16th centuries. So you still had, so this was printed, we believe, in 1507 in Paris, although it's the use of Rome, right? So the use of, in reference to a book of hours, means the place where it was meant to be used. So it is the use of Rome, but it was printed in Paris. In, we believe, 1507, because there's a piece of information here that starts in 1507. And so there's that. So it was popular manuscript. And so when people started using the printing press, when the printing press got popular, remember, we say it was 1450, is when it really started in Germany, and then it was sort of all over Europe very quickly. The Bible, we all point to the Gutenberg Bible as like the first, one of the first like books that was printed on a large scale. Books of hours are going to follow really quickly because they were popular. And the great thing about printing was that it made it much easier to make many copies of a book. Instead of having to sit down with a scribe and write it out, individually, you could set out the print, and then you could make many, many copies. It still took a long time, right? It wasn't super quick, but it did mean it was faster than like making 100 handwritten books of hours. You could do 100 printed books of hours more quickly. This is printed on parchment, which is interesting. So if you've ever thought, did people print on parchment? Yes, they did. This is parchment right here. And I'm going to start paging through. Actually, let's start at the beginning, because it does have this element, which you wouldn't see in a manuscript book of hours. At least I've never seen it in the manuscript books of hours. Manuscript books of hours usually start here with the calendar. So I'm not even sure that's the calendar. Here we go. No, the calendar actually starts here. So there's these other pieces that come before, which are more typically, you're going to see them in printed books, which makes sense because here's a printed book. So Amy points out in the chat that the use of Rome was used widely. So it makes sense that you could that you would be printing use of Rome in Paris. There I am. Sorry, I have to do something very quickly. I'm also going to shut the door because I neglected to shut the door and it's noisy in the hallway. All right. But you all have had enough time to have a lovely view of this. So I am not an expert in these technologies. The description says that there are both wood prints, wood block print, and metal print in this, and I do not know if this is a wood print or a metal print. But in any case, it is some kind of printed. This is not hand drawn, right? So we have that. We have a skeleton, which is sort of interesting, and I think that these are the 4 humors. So that's kind of an interesting thing to be including here. If you're not familiar, in medieval and earlier to medicine, there was this idea that you have these 4 humors inside you, which are literal, like blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and that these are the 4 things that basically control your health and your mood. And so you want to have these 4 things in, you want them to be in line with each other so that you are going to be healthy. And so it's kind of an interesting thing to have there. Then we start with a calendar. So this will look, if you've seen a calendar, in a medieval calendar, this will look somewhat familiar. What it does is it lists out the days of the month and then what holidays or saints you celebrate on each day. Anywhere you're going to see a little bit of color or a little bit of gold, which you have both of them here and here, that is added by hand. That is not part of the printing process. So early printing, there's this period of the first 50 years, which we call the incunable period, right? Incunabula were made from about 1450 to 1500. So this is post-incunable. If it's 1507, it's later than that. But it's still part of this period of time where bookmakers, the people who are making these, are figuring out what a printed book is and how it's different from a handwritten manuscript. Because you have to remember, in Europe, before the printing press, every book was a manuscript. It was just the way you made them by hand. That's literally what manuscript is. And there were certain things that books did. And so the earliest printed books also did those things. Things like having illuminated manuscripts that were added by hand. And then over time, because of the needs of the printed book, you started getting things like title pages. A manuscript doesn't need a title page, really, because what a title page is, it has the title, right? But it also has like the publisher and the date and the edition and the printing. And these are only, I mean, obviously the date, right? The date and the title. But things like the publisher and the printing number and the edition number are things that really only happened once people started printing them. So then you started seeing them. So we are still in this period. One thing that we get here, which you also get in handwritten ones, are these borders. Sort of throughout the book, you're going to see these borders, which again are these metal prints and or wood blocks. And again, I'm not sure what they are, but they're really lovely. And these are similar to what you would see in a fancier handwritten book of hours, right? You're going to have little miniatures. Often you will have the labor of the month and or the zodiac. And so I haven't looked really carefully at these. I'm not sure, maybe these are the labors. This isn't a labor though. This looks like somebody attacking. So I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if Amy has a better idea of what exactly is happening here. But it's interesting, and it does look like it might be a sort of change a period of change, which is kind of interesting because there's more war. I don't know. Interesting. And then this is one of the things in here that's really lovely is and I think that this was, let me go back to the description. This is a metal cut of Saint John being basically martyred, right? He's being martyred. He's being cooked essentially over a fire. And this also is hand painted. So it was printed, metal cut, and then it was painted. And this is the opening of the gospel lessons, which again, this is like a section that you're going to find in books of hours. And again, we're going to see these hand painted illuminated initials and these little, this is fun. So we've got these little colored bars filling up the end of the line and here in the middle of a line. This is, again, something that we see in manuscripts, and they are used just to fill in the space, just so there's not blank space there. And it's interesting that they're doing it here as well. I am going to note that here in the gospel readings, we're going to have our 4 gospel writers, and I'm terrible with this, but I can't remember, but one of them has an ox, and then we have the angel. If someone in the chat knows which is which, you can say. And then here's the lion, and the man, I think, is the next one. I'm terrible about that. Oh, no, we have 3 of them. I'm not sure where the other one went. Luke, Matthew, Mark, and then John is the eagle. Amy says John is at the beginning with the fancy painting. John, do you mean do you mean further in the beginning, Amy? No. Sure. Yes, please. Oh, got it. Okay. There we go. Okay. So there we go. Okay. So there's John, and then the other ones are here. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay. And then, right, Mark is the lion, so he's the last one. And then we have another, and here's in the Garden of Gethsemane here, we have another one of these great painted one. And what do we have? 16. Oh no, I think this is more. I'm just going to come here because this, you can see this choir it's quite loose. So we're just going to come right here. So now we are going to be starting up the Hours of the Virgin. And I knew that this was the Hours of the Virgin before I even looked at my record to clarify it. And it's because the Hours of the Virgin, it's, as I said, it's a set of daily prayers. So you start very early in the morning, and you start with, I think of it as the life of Christ from Mary's point of view. So the first illustration that we're going to get is Mary, and here comes the angel to tell her, it's called the Annunciation, right? It's being announced to her that she is going to be the mother of God, of Christ. And again, it's this great metal print. And there's Adam and Eve in the background with the serpent, so very human illustration there. Both Mary and the angel have little gold in their halos. That would have been done by hand. And I think this is lovely. There's a little book open on Mary's lap, so she is, maybe it's Bible, or maybe it's actually her Book of Hours. You know, it's not historically accurate, but this idea of her actively praying or reading. She's often portrayed with a book in her lap. And actually, I need to mention our colleague Nick Herman, who I think many of you know. He was just here with me last week. He has a project called Basira, Basira, that is all about books in medieval and Renaissance art and how they're laid out and describing them in different ways, because there's a lot of meaning to that. So we're actually going to get a lot more hand illumination in this section just because of the way the text is. So these lovely little blue and red initials, again, they would all be done by hand, and not, I often talk about when we see blue and red, it's often like red and blue, sort of alternating. This is not quite alternating. I see a little bit more red than blue. I don't know what that means. Maybe they just had more red paint and they wanted to use it, and less blue. Hard to say. Thank you, Amy, for putting the link in there for the project. Yes, Amy says, for more information about the printed borders, see the catalog record for the printed part, because there, and I think they get reused also. So you're going to see the same little pieces. Like, I know that I've seen this one earlier as well. So they had a lot of pieces that would sort of get remixed essentially to make these borders. All right, again, every time it does that, it's because hold on, I'm unhappy. It's because I'm unhappy. I'm gonna do that. Here we go. Yeah, don't love it, but there we go. Okay, there we go. Yes, I've seen this one too. A Grand Army, oh, that's not English. It's French. Let's see. Okay, so Lynn, really interesting marginal images, and maybe in the text they couldn't afford any more blue as lapis lazuli was so expensive. I do not think that this blue is lapis lazuli. We'd have to do testing to make sure. There were a lot of different ways to make blue. I mean, it's possible. It's a very dark, dark blue. I don't think lapis lazuli would have been used for a book like this. But yeah, I mean, it could be something like that. Like maybe the blue was more expensive and the red was less expensive. Oh, this is interesting. We have an illumination with no color. That's kind of neat. Also, the gold is not gold leaf. The gold is what's called shell gold, which means you essentially take gold leaf and make it into powder and mix it in with some kind of something to make it stick to the page, and then you essentially have a gold like a gold paint, and then you paint it, and that is it's going to be less expensive than gold leaf, but still it's very beautiful, and it's just not as shiny, and it's flat, and that's sort of how you can tell the difference. Let's see. John Black notes that John wasn't actually martyred. He miraculously survived his boiling and was then exiled to Patmos. There we go. So there's your lore about St. John. I knew that St. John was on Patmos. I didn't realize it happened after his martyrdom. That's interesting. So one of the nice things about printing is that you could get very decorative, and it would be less expensive. So I think that that's one of the reasons why we're going to see um, printed books of hours like this. So I want to imagine like what it would have taken for an artist to, hand draw something like this. Obviously, an artist did have to hand draw this once, and then it was made into a plate that you could etch and do over and over and over again. So that would have been that. So I just love these. I don't know. I think this is so cool. This period of time with the moving from like manuscript to printing. So we have been going pretty slowly. We only have a couple minutes, and we haven't even seen the manuscript part yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to very carefully close this back up, because the manuscript part, the handwritten part, is at the end here. So let's see. So this is going to look familiar. Oop, here we go. So here we are. So this is the end of the printed section, and then here are the added manuscript pages, and this might look familiar to you. We have seen manuscripts like this. In fact, I think we have a book of hours that is written essentially in the same script. It's like a French, let me see if I can find in the script, French semi-Gothic hand. So it's just sort of added things, and this is something that you see also in handwritten book of hours, like in manuscript book of hours. People will often add things. They were incredibly open to being personalized. Kate Rudy, or Catherine Rudy at the University of St. Andrews has done a lot of work on the personalization of books of hours, and this is just what they did. So somebody bought this printed book of hours. It would have been less expensive than having a manuscript made, and then they said, you know what, here's some other stuff that I want. So they may have hired a scribe to write out, and it's just a few pages, right? So let me zoom out a little bit. It's just a couple of pages, but the initials are very similar. Actually, I wonder if it's the same artist who did the initials. Amy is nodding her head, so yes. It looks like it's probably the same. So you can imagine this would have been like the process is they brought this printed book to a scribe, and they said, hey, can you put in the little initials, and then also write up these couple of pages here. And there's also room for more. So there's a couple of more ruled pages that were just sort of kept in here. And so if they wanted to add more later, they could have done that, and they just didn't. So it is 12:30, so we're gonna finish up. But thank you, everyone. For this, we don't usually look at printed books, but I feel like this one is a really interesting kind of example of this time. So hope we'll see you next week, and have a great week, everybody.